Right. So I'm gonna do a video speech. I'm also gonna try to do a written one. I am doing a video one because, as you guys have seen, hopefully from Tribal, I am at Survivor all weekend and I don't have any time. Um, so I'm gonna try to do a written one. It probably won't be as good because it'll be rushed, but I hope between questions and this, um, you guys can see my game. So I know people probably don't want to watch 20-30 minute video of me rambling about my game. So I'm gonna just kind of do a TLDR at the beginning. If you guys would like to stay for more in-depth like analysis, then feel free. Um, so why should you vote me to win? So, I played a physical, strategic, and social game. I can pretty confidently say that I was allied with pretty much everyone in the game, that I was on a tribe with. The only exception to that, I think, was Ben because I didn't really get to know Ben, Alex, and then a couple people from my OG tribe. So I positioned myself perfectly in the middle all game. I didn't receive a single vote in merge until final five, and I still only received one vote. Um, Social wise, I had like duos where I needed them, more specifically in terms of Tim and Dutch. Dutch specifically was a big aspect of my game, not only because I adored the dude, but super chaotic, huge shields, and if I could have that in my corner and in my pocket, then I'm gonna do that. Tim was another big aspect of my game, social game. Um, I knew that Tim and Dutch were at odds coming into merge, but I basically like brought them together. I was the glue for them to come together. And I basically was like, you guys are my number one and my number two. I need you to work together. And they did. Even becoming a duo at the end. So, which I knew, but I also knew that Dutch prioritized me over Trey. So, oh my God, Tim, I'm probably gonna do that often throughout this. I'm so sorry. Um, so yeah, I like I said, was allied with pretty much everyone. And then moving into strategy, like I said, positioned myself in the middle. I probably my two biggest moves were Final Five and Final Four. Final Five, where I convinced Patrick and George to vote Trey, because I knew Trey would be a huge threat. And while I wanted to keep a shield in Tim, I couldn't keep two shields, and so I knew Trey had to go because I was also afraid of Trey winning immunity. Um, because they had proven themselves to be competent in challenges. So I convinced George and Patrick to vote Trey at Final Five because I knew that that was the best path forward. And then Final Four, I convinced Patrick to vote Tim. I convinced Patrick a bit less, but when I first talked to Trey, no, when I first talked to Patrick, um, Patrick straight up was like, no, I'm not even gonna consider voting Tim. And then I basically was like, well, we kind of lose if Tim is there. And Patrick was like, okay, well, tell me your reasons. And I told Patrick my reasons, and Patrick was like, okay, I'll think about it. And then Patrick decided to vote Tim. Um, so again, that was another strategy. Another big part of my strategy was on the swap tribe with the Kevbot boot. Um, that twist was fucking awful. I ended up receiving five votes, I want to say. I think it was a 5-2 to 1. 5-3, no, 5-3 to 1. Um, so I basically orchestrated that vote with Dutch and Colburn. It was kind of me who is like, let's make a big move. I don't want to get rid of Matthew because I knew Matthew had the extra vote, and if Matthew leaves, I didn't want the extra vote to go with him. I knew that that would be valuable for my game moving forward, and I didn't want that to go. So I basically was like, okay, what are other options? And I knew that Kevbot and Z-Rob had created an alliance of OG fellows, I want to say it is, plus the two med students, which are Colburn and I don't remember officially OG Tribe, so I apologize. Um, but I knew that there was an alliance that did with everyone besides me and Matthew, and I knew that if Matthew went um, at that boot, that I would be next. And I knew that they were splitting the votes between me and Matthew, and I was like, okay, you know what? I'm gonna pull Dutch is here for second opinion. Dutch is my number one. I trust Dutch completely. I'm gonna pull in Colburn, we'll build some trust, and we're gonna get rid of Kev because I felt like Kev was gonna be a big threat going into this game. Kev was also close with Paige, who at the time was a big threat to not only like my allies, but just the game in general. When I was on there on Second Opinion, Paige had been causing a ton of drama. I'd heard like a ton of stories about what Paige had been doing, and we needed to weaken Paige. Um, so again, that's another. I'm trying to make this quick. I'm so sorry. That is another aspect of my strategic game. A big part of my strategy was just being social. I kind of put the two and two together. You can't have a strategic game without a social game. You can't have a social game without a strategic game. And then physical, I mean, I won immunity twice. I won the same amount as George and Tim. But if you'll notice, I did also get second twice. Also, big part of my strategy was pinning George and Trey as big challenge threats when I knew that I was the biggest challenge threat. I just didn't want people to know that. So what I did is I kept like constantly sprinkling like, oh, George and Trey are comp threats. Oh, George and Trey are comp threats. Like I kept constantly saying it so that when people thought about comp threats, that was the first thing they thought of and it wasn't me. They weren't looking for the bigger picture. And I think that did kind of work in my favor because nobody said, at least said to my face, that I was a comp threat, which I am. Another big part of my strategy was keeping Tim till Final Four. I knew I could beat Tim in Final Four immunity, and I knew that if I voted Tim out, that Tim would give me the legacy advantage or disadvantage, sorry. And I didn't want to risk that. Also, Tim was a big shield for me, and I knew that I could pretty much have Tim in my pocket the whole time. Um, so that is the TLDR. I appreciate if you guys have gotten this far. I tried to make it as quick as possible. The speech, or yeah, the written speech will be in way more depth. Probably have the same points as this, but again, be in a lot more depth. So now to go into round by round. Um, so starting at 8 minutes, I'll mark that for you guys. So first round we lose. This is on OG Residence. It's final 21. I create an alliance with me, Dutch, and Trey because we all vibe together really well. Dutch tells us that he found an information room that tells him how to put together basically Frankenstein in the hospital, but it requires 4 parts. So we pull in Matthew, who had confided in me that he found a room that if you guess who goes home, you get an advantage. So we talked about that. We I think he guessed Caroline, which is no, Stanishi, who ended up going home, and got an extra vote, and that I knew about the extra vote immediately. Um, so that was a big thing. So we pulled in Matthew to the alliance, and we had a core alliance of me, Matthew, Trey, and Dutch. That was called the Hive Mind. And we went to the safari or the hospital. We got the pieces, and it was at that time that we realized that there was a group of 3 med students who were also going for the same thing, that being Paige, Ant, and Colburn. So we were openly a core four. They were openly a trio. So we kind of, once we got all the pieces, we met in the turn-in room and we kind of agreed like, hey, we're not gonna out the idol, which didn't end up happening, but like we're not gonna target you for the idol, and then in return, whoever gets the idol doesn't idol any of us 7 out. Um, So I think that was a good way to like kind of establish trust pretty quickly. And then yeah. So final 21, I received 2 votes. Stanishi receives 5. Patrick comes over on a second opinion. That's where I first get to meet Patrick, and we get along pretty well. Um, I received 2 votes. I knew I was getting rid 2 votes. Because I didn't really vibe well with Caroline or Stanishi. So I basically went to Caroline and I was like, hey, I know you're voting me. That's okay. If you would like to stay true to your number one, who is Stanishi at the time, like that's fine. I understand that. And Caroline did end up voting me, which if you vote me, you have to go. Like, I'm sorry. I just like I tried to give Caroline an out. I was like, you'll be voting in minority, but if you want to do it, you can continue to do it. And she did it, so she had to go. Um, so Stanishi goes home in a 5 to 8 to 2. Hello. 6 to 2, I want to say. Um, and then we win the next couple rounds, and then final 18 is where, sorry, I'm just pulling up my tribals that I went to. Um, final 18 is where Caroline walks from the game. Caroline probably would have been the boot anyways, but I think it probably would have been between George and Caroline, with Caroline going home, and Caroline ended up going home anyways. And then we swap. I am swapped away from both Tim and Dutch, Trey and Dutch, which is probably like worst case scenario. Um, so I'm swapped away from them, and it just really sucks. Like I adore both of them so much. It was awful getting moved away from them. Um, but I did get to meet um, Tim, Colburn, Patrick, and we pretty quickly formed a group of 4 of me, Colburn, Patrick, and Tim. Me and Tim got together pretty quickly in terms of a duo, um, because we got along really, really, really well. Um, So yeah, pretty tight duo almost immediately. We didn't really confirm it until later, but we kind of knew anyways. It was an unwritten duo. So we win the first challenge of swap. I go over to the other swap tribe on second opinion, and that is where I get to see Trey and Dutch again, which is amazing. And I basically like tell them, um, I don't want to I don't want to be split up in the safari or in the hospital. Why is the exposure so bad? I'm so sorry. Um, I don't want to be split up in the hospital, so we basically like me, Trey, and Dutch take turns swapping who gets to meet with me in the hospital. Maybe that'll no, that's not better. Um, we basically like take turns meeting in the hospital. So I originally met with Dutch, and then I met with Trey, and then back and forth, so that we can keep in touch, we can keep talking about things, keep each other updated with how things are going, just basically stay in touch the whole time. So we were doing that. Um, I go over on second opinion on the first vote, and it's a Tara boot. It was pretty simple almost immediately. And that's also where I get my first look at like kind of how messy Paige was being. I had kind of heard things before about Paige like basically strong arming people in the first vote, and Paige basically telling Colburn to like give her the advantage that they were both going for. Um, and like lots of things. So I was very, very hesitant about Paige. Like I didn't want to get to like her because I knew that she'd eventually have to go. So I basically like kept my distance. And I'm glad I did because at the end of that tribal, things very easily blew up. Paige basically told George that Aunt wanted George out. Aunt never said that. Um, George confronted Paige and Aunt and Tara because Tara was throwing out George's name. And the whole thing was kind of crazy right as travel was happening. Um, so that was not really fun, but so that happens. And then hang on, so then we do um and the next tribal after that is the one with the twist. The person with the second most amount of votes goes home. So it was around that point that Colburn had told me that an alliance was being made of everyone but me and Matthew, and that I would be getting the majority of the votes, and Matthew would be going home. And again, I knew that Matthew had an extra vote and I needed that I needed that. I knew he had it. I needed to use it to my advantage. So I basically was like, no, we're not doing this. Dutch gets sent over on second opinion, which is amazing for me because that's another number for me. And I basically I think originally the plan was supposed to be, we had how many people on Swap Tribe? I think it was 8 on Swap, plus Dutch. So it was supposed to be 5 to 3 to 1, I want to say. Um, with me voting Matthew, they were gonna people in that alliance were gonna convince me to vote Matthew. So I said, no, I'm good. I went to Matthew and I was like, I need you to vote me. I also told Patrick to vote me because I wanted as many votes as possible. I knew if I got more than 4 or 5, I wasn't going home. So I basically I knew that Alex and Rob were voting me and somebody else and I can't remember who. Um and so I told Patrick and Matthew, vote me. I want your vote. I want you to vote me. And then me, Dutch, and Colburn came together. We created a trio and we basically just talked through the whole thing. And that was when Colburn suggested voting Kev, but I had also already been pushing for Kev. Ideally, I wanted Rob out, um, but I also wanted Kev out. Either one for me was fine. Colburn was protecting Rob, so we went with Kev. But we pulled off a 5 to 3 to 1, um, and it was perfect. They didn't plan for me to do anything. They were planning on a 5 to 3 to 1, just not the way it went. So that was perfect. Um, and I survived that one. That was when I received my votes. Um, we lose again after that. And it's a pretty easy Rob boot. Um, That is when I basically was up 24 hours for the challenge. Again, another aspect of my physical game. I will do whatever it takes to win a challenge for my tribe. And that was pretty evident with the whole, what was the challenge called? Longest shift ever. Um, excuse me. Um, I basically I stayed up 24 hours, and I got 49 out of 50 tasks done, even though I should have gotten 50, but God forbid a girl doesn't want to procrastinate. Um, so yeah, I got 49 out of 50. I was given sleep psychosis, in which I had just blindsided Kev, or well, the entirety of the tribe, pretty much. Um, and I couldn't talk. I couldn't talk. So keep in mind, before this round happens, I VC'd Tim and I was like, hey, I know I fucked it up. I know I fucked up your game. I know I just voted out your number one. I'm sorry. I had to do it for my game. You have to understand why I did it. And Tim did. I told Tim about my extra vote, which I just realized I didn't even ever mention. Um, after me, Trey, Dutch, and Patrick, no, and Matthew went and got the idol. Me and Trey went and got an extra vote in the hospital. Um, so yeah, So I told Tim about my extra vote. I was like, I want you to still trust me. Like it was nothing against you. Like I'm giving you this piece of information that you could absolutely use to fuck me over, and you'd be more than welcome to do it. Like I wouldn't blame you. Um, but if you don't want to, here's how I can benefit you. So I basically like Tim trusted me almost immediately again. And then we went back to tribal. I had sleep psychosis. I had an alliance of me, Patrick, Tim, and Colburn. Um, and I basically I sent a very long paragraph, basically saying, I know I fucked you guys over last round. Please talk about the vote in here. I can reply as best as I can. Like I am with you guys 100%. I don't want to stray away from you guys. Like use me. um, because I knew that with sleep psychosis, the wording was very specific. It said you get one warning before you get a strike. So I used that entire message as my warning because I knew I had to say something. So I basically like did all of that, and then it was a very, very easy Z-Rob vote. He just wasn't ever here. So I mean, it was extremely easy. He didn't even realize that I had sleep psychosis till 3 hours after I had it, and thought I was being aggro with him, which I kind of was, but you know. Um, so that happens. Aunt is also here. That's where I finally get to meet Aunt again. And of course I can't talk with her, which really sucks. But we figured out a way. We did. Every time I said okay was correlated to a letter in the alphabet. So if I said okay twice, it corresponded to B. If I said okay once, it corresponded to A. That was a pain in the ass, but we made it work. And then we win the next challenge, which is fine, and then challenge afterwards we go back. This is final 13. Yes, final 13. Does that make sense? Final 13 or final 12? Because I think it was the the vote right before merge. Either way, um, Matthew goes home. Um, and originally I was pushing really hard for Alex to go, because I felt like I had no game relationship with Alex. I don't know if that was just a misconception on my part, but I just felt like we could never really get on the same foot in terms of gameplay. And I felt like we couldn't really. I like playing the game with people that like I have good conversations with, and the few times that I have tried to have a good conversation with Alex, um, I was left on red. So, you know. So basically I was wishing for Alex to go, mainly again because I like Matthew. I know Matthew was going through a lot. I also like wanted that extra vote. I wanted that extra vote around. Between me and Matthew, we have two extra votes. Trey comes over on a second opinion, which is great for me. And I basically like I'm like Trey, we need Matthew here. We need the extra vote. And then Trey tells me that Matthew gave him the extra vote or was thinking about it and then officially did it. And I was like, okay, well, Matthew can go. All I wanted was the extra vote. Like, that's fine. Um, which sounds really cold hearted. I love Matthew. I adore Matthew. Like, if there had been a way to keep Matthew, I would have done it. There wasn't, and I wasn't going to sink my game for it. So we let Matthew go. Um, and it's a pretty unanimous vote, I want to say. Um, and Matthew did end up like sending a whole bunch of stuff. And then did like a riddle for who got the extra vote, and of course, the whole time I knew that Trey got the extra vote. So, yeah, that was exactly what happened. And then, um, we merge. And you guys probably know most of merge. I'll get into it in a decent amount of detail, but from you guys have seen what has happened. So merge was kind of when things went downhill mentally for me. Of course, my grandma passed away, and it was just kind of rough. So I am like genuinely proud of myself for making it as far as I did, with all of that happening. I the day after we merged, I drove an hour to go meet Dutch at Universal Orlando. We got drunk together, and that was really fun. And it just kind of like solidified our duo. So that happens. While I'm drinking with Dutch, Mana sends Dutch a message basically saying like, "Hey, um, I'm gonna walk from the game." I don't know the reason. I don't need to know the reason. I hope Mana's doing all right. And I'm kind of disappointed I never got to play with them, but you know. Um, so yeah, that happens. And then we move on to the next round. Going into all of this, George like is the vote. We all know that we want to vote George. We all know that we want George gone. Like as long as George doesn't win immunity, George is going home. Um, Obviously that's not how that goes because final 10, I randomized my list. I wasn't in the right mental space to be dealing with it. I wanted to at least submit something the um for the challenge. I didn't want to not submit anything, so I basically was like, I'm just gonna randomize it. And unfortunately it chose George for immunity instead of Colburn, which I would have loved to have given Colburn immunity, but that's okay. And obviously worked out in the end. So, oh, excuse me. Um, George wins immunity, which then kind of throws a curveball into everything. And I immediately pivot to Alex. I'm like, I want Alex out of this game. Alex, like, I cannot use Alex to benefit my game. If I can't use somebody to benefit my game, I like I don't want them in the game. Um, so I basically was like, I want Alex gone, all day. It was an Alex vote. George kind of threw out literally every single person's name. Um, and then an hour before tribal, Dutch messages me and is like, they're trying to flush my idol, and I'm like, calm down. You're known to overreact, like, and panic about things. Like, well, let me talk to Tim because Tim was on the other side. I had Dutch on one side, Tim on the other side. And I was like, okay, let me talk to Tim, see what's happening. And Tim was like, yeah, we're flushing the idol. And I was like, okay, Dutch, use the idol. Um, and that basically sends Alex home. Um, that's pretty much everything that happened that round. It was lots of chaos. Um, and then final 9. Um, so sorry, it's 3:45 a.m. Don't ask me why I'm doing this now. Um, final 9 is where okay, so final 9 is the rocks twist that Ant has triggered. Again, I found out that Ant triggered it from Tim. Um, and then I also found out that while me and Trey were in the hospital together, we found some information that said production is hiding numbers, and that is correlates to the periodic table. It's a lot to explain. Um, so I find out through Dutch that Trey has an idol through that. Um, so originally the vote was going to be, um, oh my God, words. The vote was between Trey and Colburn. I was originally going to vote Trey and basically say, like, I knew it wasn't gonna count, and like to kind of save face between Colburn and Trey. Dutch was really worried that Ant and Trey were gonna blindside him, so I voted Colburn to give Dutch the best odds if they decided to put his name into fire or into rocks. And then I wanted to vote Ben. I wanted Ben gone, because I didn't talk with Ben much. And I would have voted Ben had I known. I just didn't want to be the only Ben vote. And it turns out that Patrick and Tim voted Ben, so I should have done that anyways. But Ben gets rocked out. Probably perfect world scenario for me. I basically like got what I wanted, which was perfect for me. Um, so yeah, that was that round. And then the next round is believe it's the ant boot. Yes. So it's between Patrick and Ant. I knew that Trey and Ant were super close, and I wanted Trey to be close to me. That was one of my day one people, my day one, I'm not gonna say ride or dies, because Dutch was my ride or die, but I wanted Trey to be as close with me as he was with Ant. So I knew that if Ant left, Trey would be pushed to work back. Trey would be pushed back into working with me. So I orchestrated an Ant vote. I push heavily for Ant to go. Especially since at this time I'm working with Patrick and I don't want Patrick gone. So I work with Ant, or no, I work to get Ant out. Um, and I know that Ant has the safety of that power. I know at this point that George is bluffing to have a safety without consent, which is actually an idol, which we know about. Um, and so I was like, if we can flush the safety without power or the idol, that would be perfect. Um, so we vote Ant. It goes out pretty flawlessly. Um, and it sucks because Ant was the only other female left, and I adore Ant, and I didn't want to do that, but I had to do again what was better for my game. So that unfortunately was what was better for my game. So Ant goes home. Trey is pushed back to me. Trey actually gives me the safety of that power. Keep in mind, I just voted out Trey's pretty much number one, and then he gave me a safety without power. So if that doesn't go to show my social game, I don't know what does. I also like knew I didn't need the safety without power because I was in such a good position. Um, so I mean I considered it, but I never was gonna do it. Next round after was when we were flushing George's idol. I originally wanted to vote George, call their bluff. If they play it, they play it. If they don't, they don't. And then about 10 minutes before tribal, keep in mind I have my vote on George. Dutch messages me and is like, George is using the idol and voting Tim. And I was like, okay, well, we can't do that. Like, I need Tim around as my shield. I can't have that. So me, Tim, Patrick, and Dutch get on VC. We all get on VC together, and we basically decide like the only other option is Colburn, which is why Colburn goes home. Like we didn't want Colburn out. It was just there was no other option without like cannibalizing ourselves. So we vote Colburn. It's really sad. It's not what I wanted, but it's what we had to do. So, next round is the only round I was blindsided, um, which I give credit to Tim for because he really like he was the deciding vote in that one. So it's final six. I have my extra vote. It's the last vote remaining. Or sorry, last advantage remaining. Um, and I thought it was going to be a 4-3 with us voting out Trey because I knew Trey was a huge threat at that point. It was going to sweep the jury if he made it, but it didn't end up being that way. And instead, Dutch goes home to the 4-3, which I thought was going to impact my game a lot more than it did. I was always planning on cutting Dutch, probably around 5 or 6, but having Dutch go at, or sorry, I was planning on Dutch going at 5, so having Dutch go at 6 didn't really fit into my plan, but it worked out. I just would have switched the tray and the Dutch boot, but it worked out anyways, and it was fine. Um, and then final 5. This is again where my like a lot of my strategy comes out because I know that me and Trey had a very open conversation, and we're basically like, we think each other is the biggest threat to win. Um, and we very openly said we were going to vote for each other. Um, so I basically go around. There was a couple hours there where I was in danger. And I basically was like, dude, the merge try was even named after Trey. Like, what are we doing? Trey is going to sweep if he gets there. Like, he's friends with everyone. And I convinced Patrick and George to vote Trey, and it ended up being our first unanimous vote, which is fucking crazy, by the way. It ended up being our first unanimous vote and my first vote received at the merge. And then Final Four, again, me winning final immunity was probably the biggest key for me. I knew I needed to win it, and I did. And then I convinced Tim to vote, no, Patrick to vote Tim, because I knew I was going to give George fire at the very least, because I knew that going into Final Tribal, if I'm sitting next to Tim, I would have a lot harder time beating Tim. I knew I could do it, especially since Tim has kind of been following my lead all merge, but I wanted to like make sure I go in with the upper edge. And I didn't want to risk Tim winning fire and having another move on his resume. So I basically tell Patrick, I'm like, hey, you know Tim is going to win. Like, we need to get rid of Tim. And Patrick's like, no, I can't do it. And then I basically like list all the reasons why I think Patrick should vote Tim. And they're like, okay, let me think about it. I'll get back to you. Eventually, Patrick comes back and is like, yeah, I'll vote Tim. Things kind of get blown up. Emotions are very high. Tim, if you're watching this, I'm so sorry that I made you feel like I morally couldn't not vote you. That's not how I meant it to come across. But I'll talk about that later if you want to bring it up. Um, but yeah, it's a very bittersweet vote for me because Tim is probably the person I've confided in the most. Like me and Dutch were very close, like friend bullying. Like we had like a love-hate relationship, but Tim was like my person that I went to. Um, and voting out Tim there was really difficult. I didn't want to, but I knew I had to. And just seeing like kind of what happened at the end and Tim getting hurt and Patrick getting hurt, like it was a lot. Um, so yeah, I think that kind of conveyed everything. I'm so sorry this is going on 40 minutes. Again, I don't expect anyone to watch all of this, and if you did, thank you. I really appreciate it. But yeah, I hope that you see that I had a really good social game. I was really good strategically and physically. And you'll crown me the winner.